Once people see your scars, like Saw and I have talked about this a few times, you can see the difference on them looking at you because I think you're attractive, and then looking at you because I see your scars now and I see that you're a trans man. I think people would travel as far as they needed to be able to feel what Saw and I have felt being around VACAYA.
Hi, this is Kevin presenting to Kev. And I'm Trevor Crane Dow. And this is VTV, the definitive podcast for all things LGBT travel, pop culture, and where we share diverse perspectives from members within our community. How are you dunking today?
I'm good.
Oh, alley-oop. Swish. You know what's crazy is I just got back from New York and I do like Dunkin' Donuts. I wish that we had more of them here in California.
Wow. Supporting a chain.
Well, you said Dunkin's, but it also brought up, I was in upstate New York filming this festival, and one of the actors, his name is Jimmy Hawkins. He's like 82, I think. And he kept on bringing up, he was like, you know, how do they get all the donuts to these Dunkin's? They're not making them. Where do these donuts come from?
Find out next week on a VTV.
Today's episode, we interview someone who I love very, very much. Their name is Mason, and they originally were introduced to VACAYA by being actually on the media team with us as an additional photographer, and now Mason has been a part of the V team and helps facilitate the Transcend Lounge for our trans non-binary female identifying guests. Mason is
very talented,
incredibly talented, and as wonderful as a human being as he is talented.
And so is Sawyer, who's also being interviewed for this episode.
So Sawyer joined us on our 2025 Caribbean cruise as a guest. Mason and Sawyer have known each other since Mason lived in San Diego, I believe. And on a few trips, we're able to bring models and people to be utilized for photo and video needs so that we're not interrupting our guests' experience as much. And so Sawyer was kind enough, and we were lucky enough to have Sawyer come and join us as a model for our video and photos.
Yeah, and Sawyer and Mason were buds, and we got to talk with them, and it was a encompassing interview, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think a really important interview, and I hope that our cis guests watch this interview and take away a lot of information. You know, Mason and Sawyer are both trans men, and VACAYA is an inclusive company for all people within our community. And, you know, there are different challenges that our trans guests face when wanting to book a vacation, whether it's having their passports match their gender identity and what those struggles are, whether it's a socioeconomical challenge because trans people have different financial
priorities
that they have to focus on, and so they don't have the same funds to help explore and experience travel. And also there's a lot of trauma when it comes to leaving your home base as a trans person, because you never know what you're going to face when you leave your house. And, you know, the work that VACAYA is doing, along with the help of the trans guests we've had on our trips, as well as the trans and non-binary people on our team, you know, Rome isn't built in a day, and we always are going to strive and hope for more trans, non-binary, and female guests on our trips. And Mason and Sawyer offer a really important perspective of, you know, what are some of the hurdles, what are some of the struggles, what are some of the wonderful things that are currently happening on these trips, to make it feel and make it be as inclusive as possible. And I'm really grateful for both of them taking the time to sit down with us, and I hope that you enjoy it as well.
Let's tune in to Mason and Sawyer.
Welcome to VTV.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you mind just letting anyone that's listening or watching, you know, just let them know your pronouns and how you kind of identify within the community space?
Sawyer, I go by he, him, and then I would say trans male who is pansexual and poly. Those are like full. Yeah,
That's very descriptive.
Very
I know
descriptive.
exactly.
Yeah, I get around, but not in that way. But like,
No, you're
very
modest.
open. Yes, I'm very modest. Yes, yeah.
Mason, he, him as well. Transgender. I honestly don't even know about a label, but I guess I would say most of my life has been straight. But further along in my journey, getting more comfortable with being attracted to hearts and not parts, and experiencing whatever that means. So
I'm gonna need that on a shirt.
I was just about to
Literally,
say that.
like
Yeah.
that's the shirt.
Yeah.
okay, I'll do it right now.
So for those, we should just talk about it so that I don't forget. I'm wearing one of Mason's designs right now, and Mason's also wearing another one of the designs.
Yeah, the back says, kindness is free, don't be a dick.
We love that. Just suck one.
Yeah.
What? Can I ask you real quick? Where did that like kind of stem from? What was the like inspiration for creating, a line of shirts?
Think just everything going on in the world nowadays, and just I think advocacy and just reminding people every day that it's literally one of the most easiest and simple things in the world to just allow people to be themselves and be who they want to be. This trip was the first time that I've ever run into someone that I did not know had one of my shirts, and
It was very wholesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a cute moment.
it insert sort of
Yeah.
yeah, it was absolutely incredible to see that and to know, especially when a lot of times people always say your biggest supporters are people you'll never know, and it's not the people closest to you. And I have seen my more of my stuff on people that I do not know than I am on people that I do, and so to see that support and to just never know who's watching, and to never know who that is connecting with, to see that on a ship like this was just truly something I'll never forget. So I'm just so thankful for that moment. It made everything worth it. So yeah.
I was going to ask, like you talk about that moment being so important during the course of this week, obviously. How has been like the second trip for you? It's like the first trip, I say, like you don't really know what to expect, because you're always going to kind of have like an idea or an expectation or, and then you get here and you're like, okay, it's different. How am I going to navigate it? And then like you get comfortable, and then you're like, so how has the first experience been, and the second experience?
Well,
we are filming this interview on day, what does it say? Day 7.
I think this is day 7. Okay.
So you've had like basically the whole week now.
I've had the entire week, which has felt like the entire month.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I was really excited to just be in the community, like I kind of expected there to be a little bit more of something outside of just cis gay men.
Sure.
But I was still excited for that. Like I was excited to like, connect with other gay men, because, me and my partner are open.
Yeah.
We're poly, so I don't do that a lot outside of like back at home. So I was like, I get to play a little bit, because I usually don't do that, but I was like, this would be the space to do it, and just to make other connections with other trans men. Of course, I've known Mason for years, and to make other trans male friends, and then to see other women on the boat. And so that was like one of the biggest differences that I noticed, was like it still is a lot of just cis gay.
Yeah. You live in Ohio and you live in San Diego. So like San Diego, obviously there's Hillcrest area. There's a little bit more, gay friendly spaces, but like for trans men, like are going into gay bars, does it feel comfortable? Does it feel safe?
Not really. I mean, that is a reason why I do avoid places like Rich's, because people are so grabby. And I will say on this trip, I mean, people have, like touched me a little bit. They've like grazed my ass. One person like pinched my nipple once, but
And you're like, there's no sensation of not going to do anything.
only saw you did.
They don't work anymore.
But I will say, like, when I'm at Rich's, Moe's, things like that, like, people have grabbed my crotch. They have, like, shoved their tongue down my throat without even saying a word to me.
Whoa.
They're always grabbing my ass. Like, in Hillcrest, it is excessive. I will say here, I haven't gotten that as much. Like, people want to sit there and chit chat and, you know, give you compliments. But for the most part, I feel like physically they've been respectful.
More restraint.
Yeah,
not
a little bit. Yeah. I've also had Jeremy, like,
Yes, right.
Yeah, they've
behind my back.
had their secret language.
We had this, like, if I'm like, it's like pull me out, or if I pinch his elbow, he grabs me and okay, we're gonna go this way, and then he will pull me out of there.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that kind of like nonverbal language, I think, is important in general, you know, like for a lot of these spaces, even in like, you know, potentially like in a Rich or a Moe's. And I don't necessarily feel the most comfortable in a lot of gay bars in general from the same perspective, just because like my brain doesn't necessarily go to sex right away. Like the pansexual inside of me is like, what's the connection?
right,
Let's have some intimacy. See,
saying
and I'm like working on some own personal stuff that I think like has also contributed to that. But I think that like it's difficult, and once again, like the pendulum, I hope is kind of swinging back to where, you know, for cis gay men, there was such a long period where it was so scary to be sexual.
Yeah.
That the pendulum then, once it got to a point where you have PrEP and DoxyPep and all of this, like the element of being sexual and that liberation and that freedom goes one way.
Right.
And I think God, I'm gonna sound so old, but like the generation like right below us is kind of more of the perspective of like, yeah, like let's see how it's going instead of just leading with a grab to the crotch.
Yeah.
And I think that if I was born cis, like maybe because I am a sexual person, but I feel like it's such a vulnerable moment when like what you're grabbing is maybe not what you expected. And so like we have to have that connection for you to get anywhere close to down there. You know what I mean? And like even when you're on the dance floor, and there's been a couple of times this week, and you know I'm dancing with a guy, and then like I have to like stop and say, oh yeah, by the way, like I'm trans, you know. And then in that moment, it's like sometimes they're like even more attracted to it. You know what I mean?
It
Like,
almost makes it worse. Like,
right. And it's like a backhanded compliment, you know?
It feels like it's a
Right.
Yes,
and then I've had to say that multiple times, and it's like, do you want to be with me? Or, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
do you want to
like me?
Do you like me because I'm trans, or do you like me because of me?
I'm not always in a space where I feel like taking my shirt off, not because like I'm ashamed of what I look like, but obviously we have paid a lot of money to cut body parts off. So, you know, we have waited our whole lives to be able to be in that space and do it safely. But once people see your scars, like Saw and I have talked about this a few times, but it's just like, you can see it on their face. You can see the fact that you can see the difference on them looking at you because I think you're attractive, and then looking at you because I see your scars now and I see that you're a trans man, and I'm like, now it's even worse. Now it's like it just laser focus. And you know, there's been a few people that have been like, I'm figuring out that I'm like trans attracted, and I'm like specifically attracted to trans men, and I'm specific, and it's just like, why can't you just be attracted to us for us? And instead of it being
feel equally between the two of you pretty fetishized then.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I don't, you know, Saw is a lot more open when it comes to being in spaces where, you know, being in clubs and doing all those things, and like that is something he's much more used to than I am. But I just, besides being at VACAYA, because this is where I feel safe to do that, I don't put myself in spaces like that. You know, when we were in San Diego together, it was so much easier to do that because we had built a community there and there was a safe space. But now living in Cincinnati, it's like I don't have that space. And the last place that you'll ever find me in Cincinnati is in anything to do with, you know, the LGBTQ community. It's just because it's so much harder to find safety and vulnerability there, and people who will have your back the way that you know you did the first trip. Like I said, like, you know, we've talked about this so much, but that really you were a huge deciding factor on how I viewed this trip. And every single person on the VACAYA team has like made me feel nothing but loved and accepted and protected, and I know would go to bat for me in any situation possible. But when, you know, being on the trip and working in media and having our schedules be so full and having so much stuff going on, we constantly made sure that I was seen and I was protected and I was put in a place where even if I didn't feel comfortable saying something, like you had already gotten the time, you already took the time to get to know me enough to know that like, okay, he's not comfortable with this. Like, let me change things. Let me like insert myself there. So I just think, especially as a trans person, that is what I want people to understand and know about VACAYA, is that it is full of people that there's always room to grow, and there's always things that could be, you know, more educated, and there is a long road ahead of us. But there are, I think people would travel as far as they needed to be able to feel what Saw and I have felt being around VACAYA and being with VACAYA. So I think it's just so vitally important that more people know about this opportunity. And if we have to go in the middle of the ocean somewhere to be able to find that community and safe space, then so fucking be it.
First of all, that has not worked once. There's no way that works. That was my frustration. Like, if your intention is to like be flirty,
No, but I think it does. I think it does work for certain.
I think it's just that you're that desperate to just grab somebody
Gavin.
Yeah.
that like you don't mind the consequences.
No, I agree 100%.
It's an insecurity.
But I think there's also been years and years where people didn't necessarily have to face consequences for those actions.
Right.
Yeah,
Because we didn't have the opportunity to talk on a VTB podcast about it.
Well, and I also think a component is like understanding that, you know, and we kind of recently had to do this about making sure that our guests know that like spaces like the red light district specifically, and what I'm hearing is that we should be making it a little bit more broad, not just consent is important when you're in this RLD space, but when you're on dance floors, when you're, you know, in these shared spaces, you can't assume just because is passing the right word. Like, what would be like the correct term to, is passing like?
Yeah, I mean,
say passing.
Yeah.
I
like
say I'm passing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like both of you are passing cis men. So like, I think their perspective is like, one, they don't know, but they also have come from years and years of only being in spaces where the other people that were in those spaces were cis men. And now the hope is that those times are changing and that the spaces are more inclusive for everybody in our community. And that is why that is what VACAYA is trying to do versus other travel companies where it is majority that. And yes, it isn't there yet. But like, I mean, on this trip, we had the most people in the Transcend Lounge we've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
yes.
And so if we can continue to make sure that it's progressing and growing, then, and that's because of people like the two of you who are willing to sit down and have these conversations, and then sit down and have conversations with like, I mean, we have a couple of guests here who like, you know, you shared with me that like they've been married for a long time. Husband recently came out as gay, and they're re-understanding and relearning what their marriage looks like. And they are, and you know, you look at them, and if you were to just look at them, you'd go, oh, well, that's like a cis hetero couple.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Right.
And I think that like, we have to
Stop assuming.
Right.
stop assumptions,
It's just,
you know,
yeah.
from a VACAYA standpoint, you know, like coming on these trips, just because you see a male presenting and female presenting couple does not mean that they're heterosexual. And I know that is literally, unlearning is my word for this year, but like that is years and years of unlearning. But as queer people, that's kind of our job, is to continue to learn and to continue evolve, especially because the goal is hopefully that you are continuing to evolve and learn, and you want that, and you never want to be fully complacent. So coming into these spaces and not assuming that just because two people might look like cis men, you know, you might want to just stop yourself and go, okay, well, how can I approach this so that I'm also going to lead to not only a better outcome for yourself, but for the other people that you're involving?
Yeah. I think I mean, bottom line, I don't care if you identify as a whole thing. It just, I mean, in my mind, it's human decency. It's common courtesy. Like I just can't think of one single moment in almost 35 years that I've ever walked up to an individual and touched them in a private area or forced myself. It's like, we know that is such a struggle between cis men and cis women, and women have been dealing with being objectified since the beginning of time. And, that is already a catastrophe that is not gotten any better over hundreds of years. And now being in this space, it's like, we want to be accepted by society. We want to be seen as society. We want to be accepted for who we are, but there is so much work left to be done in our own community. And in my mind, it all just comes back to consent. Like, why is that something we need to have classes for? But we do. We absolutely do, because it goes in one ear and out the other.
Totally right. Yeah. I think the classes is the unlearning, is like, we're trying to build this idea of like, this is going to be fun, and it's going to be fun because we're all learning how to be nice to each other. How you could say, because I imagine that would make you both feel sexy. Like when you feel like no one's out to be grabby. I mean,
respected.
Exactly.
I mean, you would think that
women too. Women
Like
too, feeling like they're not going to be. That's why women, I feel like, love going to gay clubs.
Yeah.
Because
they're not objectified.
Right.
But the problem is now, especially in San Diego, in the gay clubs, there's straight men going there for women.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that many times where like me and my partner, who is a cis female, go to these gay clubs, and there will be men like lurking, like these straight cis men lurking and trying to come up on her. And I'm like, head out.
Yeah.
But I think that consent is starting to come up more. Like boundaries are coming up more. It's becoming a more like widely used. Yeah.
I think, do you think then like the conversations are happening because we're learning that's conversation and communication's important?
Yeah. And I think even like with mental health, like people are taking mental health so much more seriously.
Yeah.
My girlfriend, she's a therapist, and so she actually holds like boundary workshops.
No way.
And so one of them is you have a large group of people, and you go around the room and you ask for a hug, and you practice saying no. And everyone has to say no. Then you practice saying yes, and then you get to say whatever you want. So now, just taking that class once, I have learned to ask before I hug someone.
Yeah.
Because not everyone wants to be touched.
Right.
And so asking especially someone you don't know, like, can I hug you? And so
especially in rapid fire like that, you get to explore the nuances of these people you're meeting for the first time.
Yeah, because you just don't know how someone feels about physical touch.
Well, also in the comfortability of saying no. Like, I'm awful at saying no.
I know.
Yeah.
And so learning how to say no is also important, which you're going to learn that on your own. You know what I mean?
Or your life is going to be better if you can learn how to speak up for yourself.
Which I've also had to learn, is to learn how to say no. And not sorry, no, like no.
Just from,
Yeah. And it's sad that on one hand, it's especially for, everybody in every demographic, everybody deals with this, but especially being in a dominantly cis gay man space, you really, saying no just sometimes isn't enough. And I think that's what broke my heart the most for Sawyer this week, because there's so many chances for you to really be able to explore yourself and to explore new experiences in a safe space with people that you feel comfortable enough to do that with. But there's also many people that will hear no and see that as a challenge and see that as a maybe you're saying no now, but maybe you don't mean it later, and like you're not going to stick with no. And it's just like, no one should have to do that. This is, if we're all here to explore different parts of ourselves and our sexuality and whatever, it's like, why do I have to spend so much time telling you the same thing over and over and over and over? I just,
get to know me.
I feel like
Bring me a sandwich, like.
if some of these people that
a sandwich.
if some of these people that are like trying to get in fucking Sawyer's pants, like who's to say that that won't be something that can happen? But I can promise you that the way you keep going about it is the last way that that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, it's like Stockholm Syndrome.
You're making your chances of that being a thing to even work, because now he can't stand you and he wants to avoid you at all costs because he's had to say no 7 times. But if you just came up and had an ounce of manners to begin with and talk to him as a human being and not a shiny toy like we've talked about, like a lot of cis men think about trans men, it's like it doesn't have to be so difficult. If you just start out with common decency and courtesy for somebody else, whatever you're wanting to lead up to, whatever you're wanting to get out of him or that experience or whatever, that could be there for you. But allow him to make that choice.
One of my big hopes for this podcast is, you come on a trip, then, because it won't be a once in a lifetime. There'll be more. There'll be other experiences. Yeah. But like, my hope is that the next trip you come on, someone who's seen this interview and has listened to what we talked about comes up and says, hey, I learned so much, because that's happened for me a few times now with guests. And it is the greatest impact that I could have ever hoped for, is that people are taking away and learning something and then coming on these trips and applying it. So my hope is that what you're talking about, what you're describing, is maybe it's a difficult conversation for anyone to approach you personally to initiate, but hopefully they get some of those skills and they have a better understanding, so that when they do see you on the next trip, they can let you know, like, hey, I learned this and I'm so grateful. Or on the flip side, there is a passenger who maybe is trans or female or just not cisgendered male, who's going to be like, thank you for speaking on this. It allowed me to go safer and coming on this trip, being able to know that this is something that like is being highlighted and talked about, because it is so important for me to feel safe and travel. And so I hope that, once again, like, these will be continued conversations that we have and will always kind of be evolving and growing, like, it's not going to be done overnight. And that, I just like appreciate the fact that you are being honest about it, because it's not easy.
Saw and I were friends when I lived in San Diego, and that was the place where I really got to fall in love with myself and fall in love with what life meant alone, and making experiences and making community. And I think that's why VACAYA has become so embedded in my heart, and something that I will always want to be a part of, because I know over years and years of being on social media, I know how many people don't have that. They don't have the community. They don't have a safe space in their hometowns. It's definitely something that needs to be highlighted and needs to be supported and needs to be talked about, because unfortunately, as all LGBTQI people have been used as monsters in society and trying to be made into something that we're not, but quite literally trans people are used as the modern day boogeyman, and lie after lie after lie about who we are as people and what we do and why we are the way that we are. And this space is just so vitally important for every part and every letter to feel like there is a space in this world for them, because there would be a lot more people that were still alive if they felt that.
Right.
So
good point. Very good point.
I'm gonna cry. Have you noticed a difference in yourself since like the first trip and now coming back second trip?
Yeah, absolutely. The first trip, I very much was wanted to be in the shadows, and I just wanted to do my job, and I just wanted to hide behind my camera and use that as my catalyst to be in a position like this. But what I learned from the first trip is the amount of connections that are here and ready to be made. The amount of people that are here and want to talk to you and want to hear your story and want to be a part of your life. Tracy and Doug, I will know until the day I die. Like, I just never in a million years Tracy really stuck out to me during the phone call, the Zoom call, and before the trip even happened, which I think is just such a vital thing that VACAYA has to offer. And that's that chance for people, especially like someone like Tracy, who is now walking into this life that has been the polar opposite of what her entire life and marriage has been. And for her as a cis woman to feel safe and to feel seen and to be able to have the confidence not only in herself but in her marriage to allow Doug to feel the way that he feels and allow Doug to have the experiences that he wants to experience, but then to get to feel the validation for herself, like to go through having 3 kids with your husband and thinking life is a certain way, and that's the way it's been for 30 something years, and now they're on LGBTQ cruise in the middle of nowhere and they're having just the best fucking time. And it's just you would never, it's like finding those people and those experiences. When would you ever be able to connect with someone that way? When would you ever really be able to get to hear someone's stories like that? And it's just like that call allowed Tracy to feel comfortable into what she was walking into and allowed her to like talk about her feelings and talk about what her story is and where she came from, and to get, I think she has pulled everything that VACAYA has to offer from this trip out of this trip. And they both talk about constantly that this will not be their last trip and they will be on many more. And that is worth it. That will always be more important than any bad experience that you can have on this trip, because of how many people constantly make you feel seen. Like I started to feel more comfortable the second trip, because again, Trevor, we talked about this, like you genuinely are a huge reason as to why I felt that comfortability to be in a space and allow myself to let loose a little bit. He can tell you all day long. He's like, well, why don't you just wear Speedo? You look so good, blah, blah. Like, why don't you wear this? You look so good. It's like, I'm the polar opposite of that. I spent my whole life covering myself up in every capacity that I could, and in high school wearing 3 sports bras to make my chest as small as I could, and growing up in Florida and wearing a hoodie 24/7 because I didn't want to see my body. I didn't want to show my body. And now to be in a space where your body and who you are is accepted and celebrated, and it is a life-changing experience. It's not just about these parties and a cruise and we're in beautiful spaces. It's the constant connection that is happening every single day with people that you typically may have never had that experience with before. So there is absolutely a huge difference between who walked on this ship day 1 last year and who walked on this ship day 1 this year. And you are very much a huge part of that. Without that advocacy and without knowing that, even if I couldn't say it, when I had my huge panic attack that no one knows about but you and me, like that, yeah, I mean, it really, again, it was
I see. I think that and ultimately, like, the goal is that I hope that you are now that for other people on this trip and what VACAYA is.
I've seen that.
It's, and you will be that for somebody who is a future guest as well. Like it's part of what makes this such an important thing, I think, for VACAYA.
It's like it's the attempt to emulate a society we want to be in.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to put it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that is an opportunity until they get on the ship.
Yeah.
To come from places that they come from. And Cincinnati's, whatever, but I know that there are many people that come from way worse areas that have never felt that comfortability, that have never felt had a space where they could dress up if they wanted to, or wear something crazy, or just be themselves.
I mean, the amount of people who that wear a boa for their first time in their whole life, and that's not to say that's what you have to do.
Right.
That's not to say like you're going to come on a VACAYA trip and all of a sudden you're going to be wearing a Speedo.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 years down, who knows?
Sure.
The first trip I ever went on, all I had were board shorts, no Speedos. And now, I've said it before on this podcast, but now I'm parading around in a thong bathing suit, So like, yeah, small booties matter too.
We continue to bring people on the ship that go from strangers to family. And I just can't say enough how life-changing that is for people of all of all spaces, but definitely in our community, and feeling like they're not going through something alone. And I said something to Caden yesterday when he was, talking with me and Joe's sister, but I told him he's very afraid to open up and, talk, and he feels like he's what's the word I'm looking for? He's so worried about talking about himself to other people because he feels like a burden and, whatever. And so it was like, we may not be on the same journey, but we're going the same direction. And throughout that process, I've been able to find people along that way. And it's just, for years and years on social media, I've spoken to thousands of people at this point that don't have that. It doesn't matter how old you are. I've spoken to children. I've spoken to 6-year-old men and women, and they're, at the end of the day, we're all humans trying to figure out how to get from one day to the next. And every day we get closer to the inevitable, and that none of us are going to be here at some point, and everybody should have a time in their life where they're just able to exist without having to be scared, without having to be shameful, without having to hide their scars, and embrace them. And every scar that we have is a story that is that we've made it through. And I really don't give a long the orange Oompa Loompa is going to be around, but I know that regardless of that it will just be fuel to the fire for us to continue to show up and be who we are, and know that even if over half of America is severely uneducated and part of a cult, there are just as many people who don't give a fuck about how you identify, are not obsessed with what's in your pants or what's not in your pants, and they just care about you as a person. And I think VACAYA does that so well, with just allowing a space to be whoever you want to be, even if that's something that you've never done before. Like, one of the trans women that we have on the ship now lived their entire life as a very masculine professional cowboy, and is now on their first trip with their wife as a trans woman, and having the first experience ever where they can be themselves and wear makeup and being in a dress. And it's like, that shit shattered me. I just hate so much that it took 60 something years for many people to feel comfortable enough to do that. But without VACAYA being a space where that is acceptable and they are wanted, where you're encouraged to be who you are, it just opens
it's a level of validation that, like you were saying, opens a door.
Yeah, you can't get that anywhere else. Some people will search their whole life for that kind of validation, but you walk on the ship and you have 5 seconds to talk to the first person that walked up to you, and it's no longer about your identity. It's about who you are. It's like they see past all of the superficial extra shit that the rest of society is judging us on. Yeah. And here it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are, how you look, how old you are, if you're single or together or whatever. People just want to fucking have fun and meet you and validate you and listen to your story, and that's something that is so vitally important and needed. So thank you to both of you for fighting for this space and fighting for these discussions and having these talks. And because that's how we keep moving forward. That's how we keep getting to people and allowing them to see that it's not dark forever. There may be storms, but there is always a rainbow to follow. And that's what VACAYA is. And
yeah, I think that's the biggest thing I've noticed, is that your VACAYA is definitely wanting to know how they can be better, and like actually listening, like hearing us. And I definitely feel seen and heard by VACAYA as a whole, and just giving us the space to communicate how we actually feel and our experiences. And I feel so welcomed as not just a trans person, but someone in the community. And I know for a fact that the next trip that I go on, it's going to be even better, and changes are going to be made. And you don't get that with a lot of companies. So I can definitely see the effort that's being put in. So I appreciate that.
Well, I speak for all I guess I can speak for, but it's important, I think, that it is at the root of it, the goal and the mission is not built overnight, and the mission is always changing. And the only way that change happens is from healthy conversations. And that's what is, that's why I thought that this VTV was so important, because it's my favorite component of these trips are the conversations that you get to have with people. And I look forward to having more. I look forward to us having more conversations. I look forward to like you having your opinions and contributions to like what the red light district, could look like and should look like, and all of those things. Because, and I also hope that like anyone that's listening or watching has learned that like approach is everything. And, when you come on these trips, a simple, hey, how are you, can go such a long way, especially for the members of our community who are not cis and male. And I think that like,
Good point.
we can do a much better job, and should be doing a much better job, and can always be doing a better job of making sure that all people feel welcomed here, because at the root of it, that is what VACAYA is.
That was a very encompassing interview. I was very, very lucky to be sitting in on that discussion about what their experience is like and how VACAYA is helping facilitate that.
What I'm so proud of from a VACAYA standpoint, as well as our guest standpoint, is I think that there's a removal of ego when it comes to learning and understanding somebody else's experiences. And I hope that this episode allows for some reflection and some improvements made on everyone's behalf of how do we make this experience the best experience for everyone. Because at the end of the day, we're so lucky to be able to travel. We're so lucky to be able to travel together, and we need to make that the best experience possible for everyone in our community.
So thank you for joining us in this episode of VTV.
We'll see you on the next one.